Math 3, Unit 1, Section 2. Today we're talking about writing equations. So starting here, your equation for linear problems are normally in the form y equals mx plus b. Correct? Okay. Now, if you notice on all the graphs that we're going to be going through, they have two specific points marked. With a line, there isn't like a vertex. There isn't an exact starting point. So what you can do is you can choose one of these points as your starting point. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and choose this point right here as my starting point just because they're positives. It really doesn't matter though. And so if I'm writing the equation, we would write this as y equals, and I'm going to put an a here, and I'm going to put my x in here, and it's going to be x minus 1 plus 2. And actually, maybe we shouldn't use an a. We could use an m there. It doesn't really matter. We can make that an m. In our other equations, it'll be a's. Okay. So in order to find the m value, what will I do next? You would need to plug in the other point. Okay, so we've already used the 1 and the 2, and is everybody okay with why this is a minus 1? Yes, because when it comes out, it becomes the positive, so when you put it in here, it's going to be the opposite. So now we're going to choose this x and y value to plug into this equation in order to solve for m. Okay? So, we're going to write this as negative 2 equals m times negative 3 minus 1 plus 2. Questions? All right, so if we simplify that, negative 3 minus 1, what does that make? Good, negative 4. So I have negative 2 equals negative 4m plus 2. And then next, what do I do to solve for m? Subtract 2. Good, thank you. So we get negative 4 equals negative 4m, and then in order to get m by itself, what do I do? Good, divide by negative 4 to both sides. These cancel, and when this reduces, what does m equal? 1. And so now all we're going to do is plug that into our equation. So my equation is going to be y equals, you can write the 1 for m, or you could not write it. And then x minus 1 plus 2. Okay? Do we have any questions? You could also not have the 1 in front, and so you could have y equals, and it could just be x minus 1 plus 2. And you could also simplify that as well, couldn't you? And yes. Yes. Okay. I'm going through this way just so it's like consistent for all of our graphs. But there are more than one ways or more than one way to do a lot of these problems. And so yes, you could do it the other way. All right. Any other questions on this problem? Okay. Let's move on and try this quadratic next. Okay. So quadratic functions are in the form y equals ax squared. But remember, we write them as y equals a, and then we have x plus 0 squared plus 0. Now, does this one have a specific vertex or starting point? Yes. Okay, our starting point is our vertex on a quadratic function. So how am I going to write that in this problem? y equals, we don't know the a value right now, so we write a, parenthesis, and then what? We're going to use the 4. How will I write it inside here? Good. X minus 4 squared, because whatever comes out is opposite, correct? And then what goes at the end? Minus 3. So remember, your y value stays the same, but whatever is in parentheses with the x is opposite. Any questions? Okay, what are we going to do to find the a value now? We can plug in our other point, okay, our x and y values. So I have negative 1 equals a, parenthesis, 6 minus 4 squared minus 3. Can you guys see okay in the back? Yeah? Okay. What is 6 minus 4? 2. And what is 2 squared? 4. So I have negative 1 equals 4a minus 3. What will I do next? Add 3. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2. So 2 equals 4a. And then last step is to divide by 4. So a equals 1/2. Once you have your a value, we write our equation. And so what would I write for my equation here? Good. I think I heard it. So y equals 1/2. Okay, so I'm plugging that in for my a, and then I'm just going to write what I had here, which was x minus 4 squared minus 3. And that is my equation. Why is there the 1/2 here? Oh, like this? Because of the translation. So you know how this point didn't start at 0, 0? This is like your, kind of like your generic function if you had your vertex at 0, 0. And then notice that it's shifted on the graph. And so that is where this equation comes from. Okay, so whatever your vertex is, those values go there, and then we solve for a to give us our actual equation. Does that make it more clear? Yeah? Okay. Any other questions right now? Okay, let's try the absolute value one. So remember, absolute value equations are y equals a absolute value of x. Do we have a vertex on this? Yes. Okay, and the vertex is right here at 4, 2. Yes. Okay, so a vertex is where a line is changing from like increasing to decreasing. So notice how this one right here, it's decreasing, and then at this point it changes directions and then starts going up, increasing. That point is always your vertex. Okay. Yeah, so these work for your quadratic functions and your absolute value functions. Lines don't really have a starting point, although we kind of use one. And so this one's a little different. You could choose either of the points. And then exponential is going to be completely different. So we'll get to that here in a minute. Okay, so our vertex here is 4, 2. And so how will I start writing this equation? Y equals, do I know my a value right now? So we're going to write a, and then we have the absolute value of x, but what will go with that? A negative 4. Very good, because when it comes out of the absolute value, when we set x minus 4 equal to 0, it makes a positive 4, right? And then what goes at the end? Very good, plus 2. Okay, now, for some of you, when you have absolute value, it's really dealing with a line. The line is just flipping up, making that V. Could you find the slope on the absolute value? You can. okay? But I'm going to stick to just plugging in points right now, okay? And so in order to find my A value, we're going to use the other point that is not my vertex, so you can't use your vertex, and we're plugging that in and solving for A. And so we're plugging in 5 for y equals A, absolute value of 5 minus 4 plus 2. Okay? 5 minus 4 is what? 1. And what's the absolute value of 1? 1. And so I have 5 equals, you can write 1A or you could just write A plus 2. And then what would I do next? What? Subtract 2, right? And so we get A equals 3. So, do you have a question?
I'm just confused on what happened to the 1.
Oh, you can write the 1 here. I'm sorry. So with 1s, you can write the 1 or not. If it doesn't say a number, we know it's 1. So, and then right there, if you ended up with 1A equals 3 and you divide by 1 still, you still get 3. Because 3 divided by 1 is still 3. Is that better? Okay. So my equation then for this line is y equals, and then what will I write? 3 absolute value. Good, x minus 4 plus 2. And that is my linear absolute value equation. Okay, does anybody else have questions or want clarification on anything on that one? Okay. Exponential. This one is where it's a little bit different. So you can see that it's translated here, correct? Because all exponential functions, where do they originally start at? Very good, 0, 1. And so if I had an x at 0, 1, what would we do in order to get to, this is my, that's my 0, 1 on the graph. And so how did that translate? From 0, 1 to here, what did it do? So on the x, it went right 3, correct? So that's a 3. And then it went up 1 in order to get to the 2. So this was 0, 1. So on the x it was at 0, you had to go 3. And on the y it was at 1, so it had to go up 1 to get to 2. Is everybody good with that? Okay, so your exponential equation is like y equals b to the x power. B standing for your base. And so if I write this with my translation, it would be y equals b to the x, and because it translated to a 3, what would I write here with it? Very good, minus 3. And then we would have a plus 1 here at the end. Okay, questions up to this point? What do you think I'm going to do next? Good, we're going to plug in this other order pair for x and y in order to simplify and solve. So this is x, this is y. We plug it in, so that means I'm going to write 26 equals b to the 5 minus 3 plus 1. And we have to solve for b. What would I do first in order to solve for b? Okay, you could simplify. 5 minus 3 is what? 2. Okay, so that means I have 26 equals b to the second plus 1. What will I do next? Good. Subtract 1. 25 equals b to the second. And if I want to find just b, what will I do next? Good. Take the square root of both sides, and so the square root of 25 is 5 equals b. So now that we have that, what is my equation? Good. Perfect. So y equals, so we have our base 5 to the x minus 3 power plus 1. And that is my exponential equation. Okay, questions? All right, are you guys ready to pause? Yes, Denise. So we know on these graphs that your starting point before it translates at 0, 1. So if I take 0, 1, I'm just trying to see where do I go in order to get to this point. Okay, so let's just do another exponential one since we're kind of... So on this one, this is the starting point right here. Okay, and if I were to start at 0, 1, so let's look at the x first. How does this graph translate? So where does it go? If this is 0 on the x, how many do I move in order to get here? So do you see how the x is at -2? So if the x is at 0 here, that means we're going to go left 1, 2 on the x. Is that okay? Sure. See if you can write that translation. So what happens here? How many does it go? In what direction? Okay, this is at 0, 1, where this little x is, where I normally start. Okay, and so if the x was at 0 and then it goes to -2, from 0 to -2, what happened? It goes left 2, or in terms of translating, we'd write that as just -2. Our original starting would be at 0, and then this point, this x, moved and got over here to -2. So looking at 0 to -2, you had to go left 2 or -2 on the x. Okay, and then this was at 1 on the y, and this is at -1 on the y. So once it went left 2, how many did it go down in order to get here? 2, good. But specifically, we'd write that as -2 because it went down 2. So from 0, it went left 2, and then from 1, it went down 2 in order to get to -1. Are we okay there? Okay. We'll come back to this here in a minute. I just want to make sure we're understanding like the translation parts. So on this one for translating, going down one more, if this right here is telling you it's at y equals 2. So if we start here at 0, 1, how do we get here? How does it translate? And you can even write it. We're starting here at 0, 1, and I want to figure out from 0, 1, what do I do to get to the -1, 3? How does that translate? Okay, once you have your answer, check with somebody in your group. See if you guys agree. Okay, so here at 0, in order to get to -1, what do you do? Left 1. So that means that's a -1. Okay, and so we go -1 and see how the y is at 1. So we go left 1 to get here. And then how many do I go in order to get to 3?
2.
2. And up 2 or down 2? Up 2. So that's a positive 2. Is everybody okay with all that? Yeah? Okay, so if we go back here to write this equation, we would write this as y equals b, and then it's going to be to the x what? X plus 2, correct? Because this is -2, and with the x part, we set it equal to 0 and become the -2. And then for the y part, we just put a -2 at the end. What do we do next in order to solve for b? Good, we plug in the x and y values. Can I use my starting point values? No, we have to use the other ordered pair. So I'm going to be plugging in -1 and 3 for x and y. And so we get 3 equals b to the -1 plus 2, and then -2. What's -1 plus 2? 1. So this is 1. So we have 3 equals b to the first minus 2. What would you do next to solve? Good. Add 2. So we add 2 and we end up getting 5 equals b to the first. And we know that b to the first is the same thing as just writing b. Okay? And so this equation, we end up writing it as y equals 5 to the x plus 2 minus 2. So all we do is take that information and plug it into the equation we started. Okay, do you think you guys can try this one on your own? Yes? Okay, give it a try. If you have the answer, raise your hand and I'll come around and check it. Also, if anybody needs help or is confused, let me know. Okay, it looks like most of you have at least gotten to this point. So I'm going to just double check that you have this equation right. So when we're plugging in our translation, it should be y equals b to the x plus 1 plus 2. And then you're going to plug in your other ordered pair in order to solve. Perfect. Good job. All right, it looks like most of you got it correct. The one thing you want to make sure is that you don't use your starting point, and so sometimes you might want to go through and circle, but that is the point we should be using. Additionally, if you end up solving and you get 1 for b, you did something wrong. Okay, so you shouldn't get 1 for your base. So when we plug this in, we get 29 equals b to the 2 plus 1 plus 2. Okay, so then we simplify. 2 plus 1 is 3. So I have 29 equals b to the third plus 2. I subtract 2 to both sides. 27 equals b to the third, and then my last step would be what? Very good. Take the cubed root because this is b to the third, and you get b equals 3. And so my equation is y equals 3 to the x plus 1 plus 2. Any questions? Okay. We are not going to make it through all of these examples, so we're going to kind of pick one or the other on some of these. Let's go ahead and do this one right here. Do you think you guys can try it on your own? So we're going to do this absolute value graph. Maybe I'll start you on it. How will I start writing this absolute value? By writing your formula. And so we would write y equals, and then what next? A, absolute value of, good, plus 3. Close the absolute value, and then what goes at the end? Very good, plus 2. When you're solving for A, can you use that same point again? No. And so you're going to use which ordered pair? The other one, which is -5 and -1. So go ahead and plug that in and solve, and once you get the answer, show me. Does anybody need help or have questions? Okay, so the A value you should have got was -3/2. Once you get that, then you're going to plug it into your equation. Jordan, do you have a question? Okay, so I'm plugging in -5 and -1 for x and y. So we get -1 equals A, absolute value of -5 plus 3 plus 2. What is -5 plus 3? Good. So that's -2. And then what's the absolute value of -2? 2. So -1 equals 2A plus 2. Everybody good there? Then we subtract 2 to both sides. And we end up with -3 equals 2A. And the last step would be to divide by 2. And so A equals -3/2. So my equation will be what? Perfect. Okay, any questions on that? All right, let's try the next one to the left, the parabola. What is my starting point or my vertex on the parabola? Good, -1, 3. So when we're writing this equation, we will write this as y equals, and then what? A parenthesis, good, x plus 1 Good, but with the parabolas, the parenthesis is good. So x plus 1 squared and then plus 3. And I would say that a lot of people forget that squared, which ends up changing your answer. So just be careful with your quadratics that you have a squared for your x term. Okay, and then what are we going to do to find the a value? Good, we have to plug in the other point. Okay, so I can't use my vertex. I have to use the other point. This is x and y. And so when I plug that in, I'm going to write -1 equals a parenthesis -4 plus 1 squared plus 3. What is -4 plus 1? Good, -3. And then when I square -3, what does it make? 9. So we have -1 equals 9a plus 3. In order to solve for a now, I do what?
You subtract 3.
Good. Subtract 3 to both sides. -1 and -3 makes what? -4. So -4 equals 9a, and then we do what? Divide by 9 to both sides. So a equals -4 ninths. So my final thing is to write my equation. So I take this information and we're now plugging this in for a. And so we'd write our equation as y equals, good, -4 over 9, x plus 1 squared plus 3. And that is the equation for my parabola. Any questions? Okay, what will this line, what's the equation of this line down here? Y equals 2 is correct. There's nothing more you have to do on that one. Okay, do we want to go ahead and do one more like a line? Okay, so again, you have to choose what you want your starting point on for the line. It doesn't matter which point you choose. You can end up getting two different answers, but when they simplify, they'll end up being the same. I'm just going to choose this top point as my starting point. So when I write that in my equation, it will be y equals m parenthesis what? Good, x plus 2, and then plus 5. Okay, what's next? How do I find m? Plug this in. So this is x and y, and we're going to use those two values to solve for m. So we have -2 equals m, and then 3 plus 2 plus 5. What's 3 plus 2? 5. So -2 equals 5m plus 5. Next, I will do what? Very good. Subtract 5 to both sides. So I get -7 equals 5m, and then I will, good, divide by 5. And so m equals -7 over 5. And so when I write this equation, it will be y equals -7/5 x plus 2 plus 5. And just in case you want these written down, I'm just going to give you the equations on these two. This one should have ended up being y equals 3 over 2 x minus 1 squared minus 4 for the parabola. And then we get y equals -5/3 absolute value of x plus 4 is that equation. Any questions?